Pardon the interruption, but yep, Ritter Building's muted.
It's Amanda, the voice from the sky.
Okay, at 6:07, now that I'm unmuted, I will start today's meeting of the Capital Planning Committee of December 5th, 2022 at the lower conference room of the Ritter Building. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast live over the public access channel, which it is not tonight, but it will be uploaded to Lunenburg Access YouTube within 24 hours after the meeting has concluded. I understand that actually previous meetings are not posted yet. I will check into why that is and have them uploaded. If you wish to join this meeting via Zoom on one of your smart devices, the Zoom webinar ID tonight is 766-316-7607. If you would like to join but don't have a smart device and want to join by phone, you can do so by dialing 888-475-4499. And once again, the webinar ID is 766-316-7607. The posted agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at tonight's meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Those may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. In attendance tonight, we have Mr. Beardmore, Mr. Passios, Mr. Martin, and myself, Tom Alonso as chair. Absent is Matthew Brenner, who is out ill. So we wish him getting well soon. Any public comment tonight from the committee?
I do.
Beardmore.
I'd just like to note, as I have in each of the previous meetings, that I consider the ambulance to be a top priority. In fact, when I was doing my priorities that I submitted to you, Mr. Chairman, today, I listed the ambulance as #1 on my priorities list. However, I would note that while we are contorting ourselves to prioritize unlike items, there is $3.5 million sitting in an ARPA account that has been there for a year, which could be used to fund this item, as well as the special purpose stabilization account, for which there's nearly $2 million that is specifically for this type of item. And we also noted from the request that I looked for the ARPA funds that the radio request from the fire department is also part of the ARPA requests. Again, that money has been sitting in our accounts for over a year, and the requests have been in front of the board of the select board since late summer. We have 2 trucks, to my knowledge, that are back ordered until September of 2023. One was approved in 21. The other was approved in 22. And we have 2 more trucks that are on the list that we've been asked to prioritize. Those are my 2 and 3 priorities. And I wonder if it would be worth using funds that we have available now to order an ambulance, given the long lead times that we have on big trucks, and take this out of the ask that has been asked of this committee. And I know that that is on the agenda for the select board tomorrow night, is to talk about ARPA. And it seems to me that we need to stop kicking the can and make some decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I will bring that up as not only is it on the agenda, but now that you mentioned it here, as my committee reports, I will bring it up. So we mentioned probably twice tomorrow. Any other committee member public comment? Any public comment from the public? Yes.
This is Carol Ashambo, 662 Grove Street, and chair of the school committee. And I wanted to come to thank you for the discussion about including our safety items on the capital plan this year. And I wanted to ask that you carefully consider all of the safety items, including the film. As many small towns have faced these kinds of issues across our country. And some of those small towns are now saying, I wish we had done something else. I wish we had prepared better. I hope we never have this problem. I hope it is something that we are thinking about as what if forever. But I don't want to be in a circumstance where I say, I wish we had done something you didn't do. So I thank you very much for supporting what you have supported, and I eagerly await to see what the outcome of this will be.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment from the public? Okay. So we got right to business here. And that will be the discussion of the items. I want to thank all the present members for submitting their preliminary or first run prioritizations. I have captured them all on the sheet that I have distributed. I can show them when, as we discuss them, I'll share the screen. I don't know how we want to, there's no set way how we want to approach this. It's like all of our discussions is more free form. I will start by saying for my own that there was no indication. I was going to try to put an X, but the X kind of screwed up the numeric column. That there are two items on the list that I don't feel we have enough information to support, or at least I don't have enough information to support. And they are the Flat Hill drainage construction and engineering at this point, because as we discussed, in order to engineer it, there would have to be a basic plan, as I call the napkin plan, about where is the water going to go. Before we even do that, we need to know where we're attempting to bring it, because bringing it across the street to a potential private property that we would have to negotiate a deal with way different engineering than it is taking it 3/4 to a mile away. And the other one was the senior center parking lot, because I think there's still too many variables, and the cost with the amount of parking that we would net gain out of there just doesn't seem consistent with the project to gain potentially, I think we said 8 parking spots net for $150,000, and potentially have to move Cade's Kingdom or put some barrier up between them. I think that there's not enough information. I also don't feel that I think the project is premature, because I think by the time the patio and the ADA stuff is done, we'll have a better picture of what that would look like. Those are the only 2 items I didn't rate.
So, Mr. Chair, on those 2 items, I rated those as just my last 2 items. I completely agree with everything you just said relative to those 2 items. Just for discussion purposes, unless there's new information to add to either of those items, would it make sense to make a motion to not rate those items? And then we can kind of remove those from the calculus and simplify the math?
We can, if that's what the will of the board is. I mean, I'm looking, so one person rated the senior parking in the middle. So that would be Mr. Passios, who rated it as 16. Mr. Martin rated it low as well. Actually, he didn't rate it either.
Right.
So I guess I'd like to hear from Dave, because obviously he thinks it's.
Yeah, I would like to clarify that a bit. I know I was torn in my first iteration of this thing this morning. Those two items that we've been talking about the last few minutes were at the bottom of the list. But I think both projects have merit, as we've said up to this point. And initially, my thought process was, well, if I don't plug them into this merit rating system, then I've given up my vote on that particular item. I totally agree. And I don't know if you saw the asterisk in the line. The reason it didn't end up on the copy that I sent to you, it was the very next column and the asterisk didn't
Okay.
print over.
Well, I only brought over the scoring columns. I didn't bring over.
Yeah.
I saw your notes on it, but I didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I totally agree, there's insufficient information on both of those projects at this point, especially to call the Flat Hill Road drainage a construction project. Construction of what? We've got no design, we've got nothing.
Well, it's both. We got a clarification that description was for both. But even to get an engineering, I think that, what are we engineering?
Right.
Aside from the abstract of trying to resolve the issue, I don't know what the engineering is for.
The other side of the coin being that I didn't want them to be randomly plugged back into the list by the powers that have that capability, without us, making it very clear, but if it was gonna get plugged in, I wanted it. The importance of them as a project, as a viable project, is the way I rated them.
Yep.
Let's put it that way.
Right, so my response, and I'm glad you made, there's the nuance. I mean, I don't want it to be thought that I don't think either of these have merit. That is not the case.
Right.
I'm saying that there's insufficient information to move them forward. I don't say, let's take them off the list ad infinitum. I just think that they don't have enough information to be funded in this list this year.
Mhm.
And I've been a big proponent of trying to get that Flat Hill drainage, pushed forward, so.
Right. Right.
I don't think there's any disagreement here. I think we all think that Flat Hill Road needs to be addressed in one form or another. The problem is how and when.
Right.
And I think that, as I stated at a previous meeting around parking, I mean, the parking issue around the Eagle House is a longstanding problem that has come up in finance committee meetings every year that
Mhm.
Dave and I were on it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a demonstrated need. The problem is can we come up with a plan that is more fully thought through in terms of what is included and what isn't, and it's still not clear to me exactly what's included in that $150,000, because originally it was a swag around square footage for pavement. And then later it was for barriers and fences and rounding out the curb where the existing parking spots are, and we still don't know about drainage. So there are a lot of question marks associated with that project that I just, again, unless anybody has more information on that, I just don't feel like it's far enough into the proposal, into the meat of the proposal to warrant inclusion at this point. And again, for math purposes, I rated everything, but I at this point would support not including rating those two if we decided that as a board. I'm thinking in terms of consistency on the spreadsheet, right? So you have a 0, I have a 27 and a 28.
Yeah.
It means the same thing, but mathematically, obviously it does. So
I was actually gonna propose that if you chose to an item that is not ready or should not be rated at this point, then it should get a point 35 points.
just kind of knock it out.
Which, when you tally
Right,
it
I thought
up,
about it later.
knocks
I
it.
thought about that later.
Right.
Yeah.
But I support if a motion comes across the table to exclude those from our approved prioritized lists, I would support that.
Well, it sounds like there's enough information for the board, so if you want to make that motion.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Related to the senior center parking project, I haven't been at this and you haven't seen the videos. This project that I think is important to that area, parking has been a long-standing issue there. It also will provide access to that ADA compliant patio when that's done. There were questions that I thought were answered. If there were questions that were unanswered, that was unaware of, for the sought that information for the
No, the question, we're not doing it because they're unanswered. We did see the engineering plans.
Mhm.
And the engineering plans, I guess there was one unanswered question that we had, which was, well, I guess maybe
They're
there
really,
were two. There were two, but one of them is like, okay, so what is gonna happen with the drainage, with all the impervious surface being added? Where was the drainage gonna go and where is the separation between Kids Kingdom and the parking, basically to separate, what is the divider between them from a safety point of view? But
That depiction, I think, was included.
Yeah.
In the engineer's response, it showed the type of guardrail that would go up between. They also said that, the relocation of their certain pieces of equipment to the back side of the playground was because it's required to have a certain fall area, surrounding equipment, so it's a safety
but of course,
reason. Regarding the drainage, I can get clarification on that. But I believe, the drainage is related to the ADA work that needs to be done as well, because they're creating. Impervious, some impervious.
but isn't there, but let me ask you this, I mean, there's ADA access to the building, right?
Yes,
And will there be ADA accessibility from the building to the patio?
yes,
So there's de facto, then there's access to the patio,
right, but parking access adjacent.
right, to go from the parking lot to the patio. Right, okay, but I mean,
it's a short.
That was,
And that's not a primary reason for this parking lot.
Right.
This has been talked about way before I came. They talked about putting more off-street parking at the senior center for safety reasons.
Right.
So.
but
this
our,
is-
one of our concerns, certainly I share it, so I won't share, I won't distribute it to distribute ownership I'll let them decide, but for me, it's like we're gonna spend $150,000 to get 8 spots. So that's like just shy of $20,000 a parking spot. It just doesn't seem to provide the kind of parking that we'd be looking for. If we're gonna do anything with Kids Kingdom, I wouldn't mind moving Kids Kingdom a good distance away and give them at least 2 rows of parking there.
I think that's a much larger political discussion, quite honestly. There's been, from my knowledge, a lot of hesitance to move that. I think that would be a hurdle that I don't know if we could overcome. I think the 8 additional spots, that would be off street. If you look at Memorial Drive, you know, the parking that occurs along Memorial Drive, that would resolve that issue.
Theoretically, I think you're right. I think you typically got 8 or 9 cars along Memorial Drive. There's a question around elasticity of available parking. So
Right.
for example, if the parking spaces in the new lot are full and there's empty spots up on the upper lot up toward the Mossman Center, or will people still park along Memorial Drive? I think
Not if it's me and no parking.
well, fair point, okay, yep. The specific questions that I thought Mr. Alonso were gonna ask were not actually the same questions. Certainly the drainage question is one of them. But when the proposal was brought to us, it was brought as an estimate based on the square footage that was calculated into the space. So it was this $150,000 is based on the measurement that we think is gonna be X feet by X feet. I don't recall the exact measurements, but it was whatever that, the product of those 2 factors were. But since then, we have got into a discussion around what is essentially a wooden guardrail and a 4-foot fence and the relocation of a small portion of Kids Kingdom. And I did ask about, and I didn't receive an answer, I don't believe, around, does this include the relocation and the landscaping necessary to make Kids Kingdom whole? And then the drawing that we got, again, after the dollar value estimate, was that we're going to square off the entrance and basically eliminate the 6 parking spaces that 5 or 6, I don't recall the number. There's 5 or 6 parking spaces that are along Memorial Drive right now. So there's curb work, it looked to me as if there was substantially more work than just grading and putting in pavement and lines and that sort of thing. And I don't know if that is what's commonly factored into that square footage calculus or not. So it was causing me to question if the $150,000 was a real number relative to the work that had to be put in, because we got the drawing quite a ways after we got the $150,000 estimate.
That would be based on conversations with the art.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, but there's been no clarification
Square footage price.
as far as the cost. Is the $150,000 a legit cost estimate or not, based on the drawing? Because the drawing happened after the estimate.
It would have been provided by the architect, but that's certainly something we can re-clarify with them.
Well, we can hold off on this if you want to bring it up for next week.
I mean,
It's still, I will say, I can certainly be, we can certainly rank it. It's gonna be very difficult for this to rank much higher for me. Because of these things, because I think that, I don't think we're addressing the problem. I think we're fitting something into a space that's between 2 areas, and I don't think it addresses the problem. I think it just changes the problem.
I would tend to agree with you, Mr. Alonso, but I do think that if somebody told me that the $150,000 is a reliable number,
Mhm.
we can do the ROI calculus. It's $150,000 for 8 spaces, right? I mean, it is what it is. And we've got an architect who says that we've got an appropriate separation and barrier from the playground, and it's all there, right? And we can rely on that information. As I have looked at my prioritization, particularly as you kind of get down the list into the vertex stuff and the ambiguity around what we're going to do with some of these buildings, the Brooks House, that sort of thing. In my mind's eye, I begin to think about spending dollars on things that are going to immediately or soon improve the quality of life amongst Lunenburg citizens or not. And in my mind, even at $20,000 a space, in my mind, that calculus deserves consideration relative to the front porch of the Brooks House as an example, right? I'm not. Again, we're still kind of far down the list, but I think that it's legitimate data to consider if we have the information or can get the information.
Is there anything you want to add on the Flat Hill?
No, I have nothing additional to add.
So we'll hold off on these 2 motions.
Good.
In the end, it does. I'm not sure it makes any difference if they're lower or not on at all, I guess. Well, I guess maybe if they're not on, it's hard to rearrange them, to put them on. So,
Well, at the end of the day, what matters is are they above the line or below the
right.
line?
Well, no, but I guess if we don't rate it,
And they're,
I don't know if there's the ability to put something new on the plan. Would be the question.
No,
And
there's the
that's-
ability to put non-rated projects.
That's what I'm talking about. I think we're saying the same thing in different ways.
Well,
Can it find its way to funding through the capital article if we don't give it a rating at all?
in my eyes, I believe it can.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's bad or good.
I have to say, I tend to agree. Not that I don't agree that it should.
Well,
But I agree that it can, given what we've discussed about what's in the charter and the bylaws and the way we've done business in the past, there's nothing preventing the town manager from including it.
I haven't looked at it recently, exact wording, but I mean, potentially, I guess. That's why I asked the question. If it was cut and dry, I wouldn't ask the question. It would be no.
I will say too about, what we've said about it being an incomplete project. A number of years ago, when this first surfaced, it was definitely a big power off in this thing. No. it was just a project that got thrown on the list. I don't remember what number was tied to it. But there had just been 2 or 3 people that walked down there, looked at the space and said, yes, yeah, we'll put some parking in here. And at that point, there was no disruption to the playground or anything. They just squeezed it into the space they had. And again, the question came up, what are you gonna gain?
Right,
within that
and that's
space?
why it wasn't funded then.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
I don't, yeah.
So the only other, if we're done talking about these 2 items,
Mhm. Sounds good.
the only other item that came as something of a surprise was, George, you did not rate the middle school, high school turf feasibility study.
So, so my rating on that was kind of based on what I'm seeing in the news as far at the state level, for the discussions as to whether artificial turf is good or bad. And there's all kinds of studies going on right now as to the pros and cons of having that turf. So when I took a swag at this, it's like, so if we go spend this money and allocate it, and the state comes out and says no more artificial fields going forward, I was thinking I would be more comfortable if I had some kind of a response that was more or less laid out from the state.
Could I give you a completely different point of view?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with whether it's artificial turf or grass. So this is engineering specific to the infrastructure around the field and the drainage below the field.
Oh,
So we could do this engineering,
yeah,
rip up that turf and put grass, and it would really have no bearing
Oh,
on
yeah,
the
okay.
work that is being
Yeah.
requested.
so me bad, I was thinking that was a expansion of.
Yeah, so-
I read it wrong.
And by the way, at some point, that could very well be, like
Right,
the funding for the turf is a meaningful topic of conversation that's not before us,
right,
but this is really about the infrastructure
The
below
wall- the
and
wall-
around
the wall that's.
the
falling
turf
over.
that's there. It's the wall, it's the drainage
that's
underneath
green
it.
colored.
it's-
Yeah, okay,
It's all
so,
of that.
yeah, so that was kind of a me bad moment when I
Okay,
did that.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Well, just keeping on that theme, I see that you don't have a real sweet spot in your heart for Brooks House either.
I don't. As a
I
taxpayer,
think is it putting a 0 on all of them?
well.
I'm guessing that, I
A
kind
zero.
of got that vibe from it.
Yeah, so a 0, when I did this, doesn't mean I don't have any value in doing it. But it's like, where we don't know what the funds are that can be better spent and more diversified across the town. I just can't see putting any money into that building until we know what's gonna happen to it.
Right, but it's not like we don't have the ability to rate it. You should just rate it really low. Like, there's no reason to not give it a rating.
Okay, I mean, I can go back and put
Yeah.
like 31, 32, 33s all the way down.
Well, I think, I don't think you can go above what the,
Whatever the number,
Yeah.
yeah. I can go
yes,
back
you
and
should do that.
Yeah,
For
okay.
what it's worth, George, I agree with you there. Like back to the conversation we had last year about our charter responsibilities versus the way we do things. In my mind, I think those are legit questions to ask, and I question whether we should be spending in this year, given the charge that the municipal building committee has and the work that they have underway right now, whether we should be putting money into that building. It's very similar, right?
Right.
But I did rate them. I just rated them low
Yeah, I mean,
as a result of that.
I have no problems going back and putting numbers to them. So that was just my swag. And I did those.
One other question that I had around Vertex related items. So there's this item around the TC Paseo sidewalk repair. And you made the comment last week, Mr. Alonso, around like, we have to do this because we use that building for voting.
Yeah.
And obviously you want to have access for people who need to come in and out of the building for voting purposes. Has there been any discussion around using Lunenburg Middle High School for voting versus TC Passios?
Well, that would be town clerk's purview, not mine.
And the schools will probably have to be closed.
They do. They're closed on every Tuesday election and they're always closed on Saturdays. So I don't think that that would be an issue unless it's an evening sports thing. My reason for bringing it up, it has nothing to do with capital planning, but the whole issue, that last article for special town meeting that came up.
Yep.
Believe it or not, back in the day, we held our elections and our town meeting on the same day. And it only happened in like the late 80s where we went to elections a couple weeks after town meeting. And
No, actually.
Could I
elections
make-
used to be
I was-
First.
Yes, I was gonna say,
Yeah,
can I make a
Used to be
correction?
Before town meeting.
Elections were a week or two.
but
ahead
at one
of that.
point, in the late 70s, early 80s, we had them on the same day.
Yeah,
And like, in my mind, given the amount of people we have at town meeting, like how hard would that be to, you know, like, I think it's. I'm not saying we obviously can't solve this problem today, but in my mind. I'm not sure that. This amount of money to fix sidewalks specific for that purpose, there may be a broader need.
Specific, I mean, it's a building that's used, and it's used by various members of the public, whether it's the Lions Club doing their pantry there.
Yeah,
Or the Boys and Girls Club, using the gym and people getting picked up there, I mean. It's a liability and the sidewalk is really bad. And eventually, I don't think there's there's only like one scenario of the municipal building design that has that building.
no, I think that building is gonna be
Stay-
around, I'm just not quite sure what the parking scenario and all that will be
Right.
around it. Or,
Right.
what'll be left, so
Yep.
I think your explanation is reasonable, it came to mind and I was going through it.
can I ask a quick question? It came up in the last meeting and I had always had it in my head the other way around, and that's relative to the Collins scoring for projects that do have an opportunity for grant and or earmark funding. I don't know why I had it in my head that if they were eligible for grants, that it moved them down the list rather than up the list. Why, what's the rationale for moving them up the list?
To make use of money that's available. Instead of having to pay it all yourself. Same reason why we didn't pay for the whole middle school, high school, and we used the state for half it. Because it costs a lot more the other way around.
Calculus is different though, but,
Well, certainly I chose a huge project, but
well, let's look at an example of like. Things that have been on the capital plan, so for example, the fuel tanks at the public safety building. Or the patio at the Eagle House, so both of these have had successful earmark campaigns associated with them. I think that. The fuel tanks. When it was all said and done, there was unexpended capital. That found its way back into the capital plan because. The earmark covered a substantial portion of that. Isn't that correct? Town manager, did we use,
Or
did we use everything?
or the total funding was,
There was an earmark,
yeah.
but the idea being that. There's another source of funding where you might. Whatever that dollar value is, you might not use all of it. Right, so. In the event that we don't need $200,000 for the patio, we've got $100,000 earmark. And $100,000 appropriation from the FY 23 capital plan. Then some amount of that $100,000 will find its way back into unexpended capital, and we can use it again.
Right.
In my mind, that's.
Well, it's the same reasoning, basically, as I just said, is that somebody else.
Essentially a lower cost.
Right. Okay, let's see, to make this interesting for the people who may be watching. Which according to my Zoom meeting currently is none, aside from Amanda. So,
The other thing, Tom, do you foresee reorienting all of these projects based on our scoring, which is what we usually do at this point? we reorder all of the projects,
Well, that'll be
knock
for the
off, knock
next-
off the department and just list the items.
Yeah, I'll put them in our composite scoring priority when I have that. I don't have Matthew's numbers.
Right,
I told him in an email responding to the fact that he was not going to be here because he's ill.
Yeah.
I said, please get that to me by the end of the week so that I can do that, and I'll submit the list of putting all of these in our priority list in order.
okay. Is that usually in my recent memory, once we got that order down on paper, then that was what generated the final discussion, because it was easier to see.
Right, and that's what we'll do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
But I wanted tonight to be, if anybody wanted to look at these, so let me just, let's see, I gotta. Let's share.
By the way, I was over at the senior center in the last couple of days, and it looks like one of the soil test holes was dug in the middle of where the parking lot would be. It's filled back in, and you can see where it was graded over, so they know what I'm sure they know what they found under there when they dug the hole.
All right, so let's just go through this list and just see where people are and see if anybody wants to discuss anything. So let's just start with what I'm sharing on the screen here. So starting from item number 2, which is the Ritter Building painting. Dave puts it last, George puts it somewhere in the middle. Peter close to last, and I put it higher than that because again, it's one of those things I think that protects the envelope. This is interior.
This is interior.
Okay.
Interior.
Yeah, so my thinking on that was if the building is gonna be repurposed, then we may be needing to redo interior painting as we repurpose the building,
Possibly, yeah. Okay.
particularly the upstairs where we're gonna be potentially extending the interior walls.
Yeah.
If it had been exterior, I would have moved it quite a ways up.
Right,
but-
right, yeah,
not
no, as I
interior.
said, painting, when I looked at it. I'm thinking, but I could change it, you know, I may change it a little bit, it's not gonna go way down, but it's not gonna, probably shouldn't be 11. You can comment, by the way, instead of raising your hand, you can come, you're the town manager at an important meeting, you can comment on anything.
I just want to basically bring up the fact that what has got us into the position that we're building is a paralysis of doing anything with a lot of these buildings, and this is a project that I think is in that same boat. Like, who knows what's gonna happen with the Ritter? That decision hasn't been made. We've been talking about town buildings for years. And by delaying something that's, you know, was brought up in our property condition assessment as a need that should be kept up and as part of maintaining the building, I think it's important to continue to address those needs while we're still in discussions about talking about end use of these buildings.
I don't disagree, that's, I mean, again, my rating is probably a little bit higher because I thought it was exterior, but it still wouldn't be much lower. Because I agree with you, and this is a building that is actively going to be used on every scenario. Looks like it's going to be actively used in some capacity, so, yeah, I totally agree with.
Interestingly, though, the Collins score is at 12.
Yeah, well, I use this column score as okay, after I look at that column afterward,
I do too.
It really
I do
doesn't
too,
sway me
honestly.
very
I
much.
used it when comparing things and I had sort of the same attitude about, give the call and score it, but my counterpoint there, Madam Town Manager, and I generally agree with you, and I think that we've done a good job under your guidance of kind of working our way down the Vertex plan. I think that this year is unique because a year ago, the select board expanded the charge of the municipal building committee. They are running scenarios currently for this building And the future of this building will, I hope, be under discussion at town meeting in the spring, God willing. At least that's the indication that we've gotten from the chairman of the municipal building committee. So in my mind, while if all things were the same, I would completely agree with you. This year in particular, we're in a somewhat unique situation in that we're hopefully going to come to a resolution around the programming of this building at Springtown meeting. And if we do so, then I would not want to see us in a position where we're painting for one use case only to change that use case a year later.
Yeah, I don't know how much, I hear what you're saying, and in places that will involve further construction or addition. Certainly that may be the case, but I mean, the painting, not the whole building is gonna be redesigned. And what we paint the inside is gonna be what we paint the inside, almost regardless of whoever is in it. I mean, I don't think anybody has specific color schemes that they're gonna.
No, I'm not
Oh,
suggesting that.
I gotta change the color.
What's driving my decision is the need for construction on the immediate floor and the upstairs, which is, there's a likelihood that we're gonna have to extend those walls if we program this with school department offices.
Right.
And if we do that, that's a pretty significant mess that's gonna get made in here over the course of the next several years.
Well, I think it's ambitious to think that having gone nowhere with any buildings decisions at town meeting, that this is gonna be the one that does everything. I think if we can get a town meeting vote in principle that this is the direction we're going and we're not gonna go back and revisit, that would be a win from my perspective. So, and that means anything we're gonna do is gonna take a couple of years out anyway. But again, we're quibbling around the margins here.
Yep.
So at this point forward, Madam Town Manager, anytime you want to say anything, you don't have to ask, it's like, just. All right, number two, the Ansel inspection, pretty interesting dichotomy here. We have somebody who's at near the end, somebody who's in the middle, and the two people who have been up pretty high. So that's interesting, the viewpoint of the members. Anything that deals, my understanding of this is a fire rating or a fire protection issue. That is my understanding of what the Ansel inspection is. And again, that's an important part of the building and safety of people in it, as well as real property. So given the age of the building, if that hasn't been done in a long time, I could say, yeah. That's why I rated it what I did.
My interpretation was, and I was really based on your feedback the last meeting, Mr. Alonso, and I gave high rating to anything that was like, I put this within the context of risk scoring that we've talked about, you know, so in fact, I rated this a number 4, which is above even the security issues around the school department, because it relates to fire protection in a building that people are in.
Yep.
And in my mind, higher probability than other scenarios with just as high an impact, potentially, people's lives. So that was, and your explanation that it needed to be done one way or the other, I gave it a high rating.
I should note from myself, like the first 10 of mine could be almost rearranged in any order because they're all pretty high priority. So, yeah, the fact that I had to give a number to one of them and not others, they're really kind of arbitrary at that point. Anybody else want to speak on the Ansel inspection? Okay, Casey Passio's plumbing upgrade. I gave it a mid mark and everybody else gave it lower than mid and about as low as it can go on one. Again, I think the building's not going anywhere and it's going to be used. And that's why I put it in the Midlands.
Yeah, I think one of my questions on this, and I kind of have the same thought process on this, although it wasn't. I don't really remember exactly what the upgrade was. You know, there was some ambiguity in my head in terms of what exactly we're doing here. I'm sure that it's necessary.
I should
but I,
stop
Yeah.
sharing the screen. for
It
a
was the
second.
the baffle for the sewage, wasn't it?
Well-
Backflow preventer.
backflow preventer, yeah.
Yep.
But. You forced me to tell me. Do we have one now? Do we not? Is it, you know, like, I don't know. I really don't know.
To prevent flooding in the event of outside mechanical failure for the inside of the building.
Not just flooding, but like especially
And
sewage, sewage backup, which. Stormwater would be bad enough.
Hmm. Anybody that attended UMass Amherst in the seventies, got a taste of that. in some
Well,
of the
anybody
doors.
who were the last schools in the
So
primary
the-
school got
in-
it. got
The nature of the
sorted.
discussion last week, Madam Town Manager, on that one was. The building is currently connected to sewer. I assume that it has a backflow prevention mechanism in there right now. We couldn't say that definitively, but I think. Kind of has to have it, is my understanding, so
this,
are we replacing what we have, or like, it wasn't clear to me,
this again is a item in the Vertex. Sort.
which is also odd, because the Vertex report was done quite some time ago. Oops.
Right now, it has a composite score somewhere in the twenties. Low twenties.
Yep. Yeah, I would say low twenties,
So it puts in,
without Matthews.
yeah,
score.
puts it in the bottom third.
Well, while that's being looked up, we can talk about the abatement too, so again. I put this in the middle, just one above. the Plumbing, because eventually that abatement has to be done.
Yeah, you know, Tom, I was looking at this the last few minutes. Does that say abatement testing Vertex, or does it say abatement and testing?
It's
Because
just the testing.
Yeah.
it's just testing, okay, that gives a different light in my mind. I probably would have moved it up a little bit higher, but I'm still,
You and George are not fans of the abatement testing. Peter and I had it pretty much in the same area, we're like. 4 or 5.
yeah. And you know, that's as was stated, that's one of those, it's gotta get done. Pay
It's
now,
very, I
pay
have to
now,
say,
pay later.
from a psych, right, exactly, and I think that. Psychology is very interesting to what my next remark was gonna be, so you get a good interest about what people, different members of the committee focus on. Because we have that switch, and then if we go to the sidewalk one. You know, it kind of changes that most people thought it was decently high, but Mr. Beardmore thought it was not high. So it's like, it's kind of interesting, the psychology of what different members focused on as being important, which
Yeah.
is why. It's important to have a 5-member board and or committee and
Yeah.
average out the scores.
And again, my logic on that was. Until we're crystal clear on the final. Footprint of the building and programming of the building. It seems to me that it may be something that we would find ourselves redoing at some point over the next several years.
Well, this is not a sidewalk redesign, it's a sidewalk repair, and it's
Fair
only
enough,
it's only $25,000, it's not like we're
Yep.
gonna,
Yeah, I didn't get it. Oh, it was pretty low on my list.
So we can go to Mr. Martin's favorite, we'll just take these, all the Brooks House ones. Now, I also, as you can see by my scores, although I did rate them. The Brooks House, I rate at this level. Because town meeting has not been clear about what they want to do with the buildings. And this building is the one that's on the cut. I think everybody is kind of in agreement that we're not gonna get rid of Ritter, we're not gonna get rid of the town hall. You know, but what happens with the Brooks House? It's about as even split as I can see in the town.
Yep.
And. I mean, all of the, I don't disagree with any of these things on the Vertex report. But to Mr. Beardmore's point about it, the other things in the past, it was like, I don't want to put all this money into it, only to say, oh yeah, you know what? We can't, we're finally gonna come to an agreement, we should tear it down, and then we spent, what do we got here?
400,000.
Yeah, $130,000. $130,000 for nothing.
I agree with everything he's just said. There's another piece of this as well, which is, I think that we have to be really careful about where we spend capital planning dollars, like every other
Mhm.
dollars that we spend. But as we're looking at building reuse and the work that, that the municipal building committee is being charged with. My hope is that they bring a plan forward that would include engineering that we need to do for all of the work that needs to be done, perhaps with phases. And then following that would be a financial plan that includes excluded borrow. So for example, I'm just spitballing here, but the school department has talked about potentially putting the early childhood care services in the Brooks House as a potential scenario, because it hasn't been included in the scenarios the municipal building committee has proposed. If we were to go that route, I would want that programming to be added to the program that the municipal building committee is bringing forth, and it could potentially be included in an excluded borrowing package. And we could dedicate capital plan dollars to other things, such as firming up Turkey Hill or something along those lines. So that's kind of my logic, is like, it's not to say that we shouldn't do this, it's maybe there's a better scenario to do this as we get more information over the course.
Well,
of the
yes,
next several months.
I don't disagree with you. I think that attaching it to a larger project like the municipal building design, that changes the whole scope.
Yep.
And that's going to be presented, presumably, one would think, as a project that the town will vote or up or down. And then if it's included, then we don't have to worry.
Right.
We don't have to worry. My concern is that we keep kicking the can for all the buildings down, and the town meeting doesn't vote, and we get one vote. I mean, I'll take the old primary school. Took forever to get to a thing where, okay, we're going to allow it to be demolished, and then what we wanted to do is put something there, and then the town puts on the brakes and says, no, we don't want to put anything there, we're just gonna knock it down. I'm like, but that wasn't what was discussed, and it from town meeting to town meeting, it just goes back and forth like this.
And there's a legitimate argument to be made that it's demolition by neglect. Like that's a legit argument. And it's
Well,
unfortunate.
it was demolition by neglect well before there was an APD. So,
Fair point, but
okay,
we're sitting here talking about the Brooks House today, and the APD's been around for
right,
6 or 7 years,
Right.
so it's a very similar circumstance.
well,
right?
I'm in the minority, I probably on this board, I mean, I would put it higher, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that the town, I know where the town is, that the town is divided, I'm not gonna supersede. I have to feel what the town is best served by doing, not what I think that whether the Brooks House should be saved or not is not relevant alone.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's,
Yes, absolutely.
Brooks House is the only building that town meeting did give approval to sell.
Did we?
Yes.
We finally did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have,
The building itself,
The building
yes.
itself.
oh, okay.
Not the
Right.
property.
All right, I'm traumatized from that article. We're gonna sell the whole property.
No,
Okay,
Did that ever get advertised and there were no takers? Is that how that scenario went?
no, it hasn't been advertised.
Okay, I won't go down that road right now.
I think we talked about also
Yeah.
authorizing the sale of the making a property out of it, not just the building, I don't think. Because that would just relegate somebody to moving it, and that is such a long shot that somebody's gonna do that. I mean, that's almost like not doing anything, because the chance of somebody coming forward. I mean, I remember when John Londa had the idea that, yeah, we should, demolish School Street and then move that house to School Street and sell it as a property and get it back on the rolls, and you save two birds with one stone, and it made all the sense in the world. But, you know, there's not a whole lot of people in the world who are interested in moving an aging building. Even if it's just 3/4, you know, half a mile.
Culture.
Time travel 60
Right,
years ago,
and that-
they did that on a regular basis.
And that's why I struggle, I have nothing personally, it's a historical building and there's some value and everything, but it's, my struggle is like, what are we gonna do with it?
Right.
I don't see any town citizens driving in there to do things.
Yeah.
I hear that there's like a facility person in there.
The school facility.
Yeah.
Who's been in there for, that the position has been in there for a long time.
Yeah,
And that's just so the building's not vacant.
right.
That's for insurance. buildings.
Right.
I don't want to get into a debate about historical building, but in my eyes, it's a whatever 100-year-old farmhouse, like probably 200 other properties in this town. So, I mean, what is super unique about it, except that it was the farmhouse on the land that the town now has the schools? I'll leave it at that, and somebody can yell at me on Facebook or whatever they want to do.
Well, you did preface it by saying you didn't want to, when somebody prefaced it by saying, I don't want to start a debate,
Here we
the
go.
first thing people are hearing is, oh, this is going to be a debate.
I think what I meant was a debate tonight.
Okay, got it. Well, I mean, there's nobody on the historical commission here. Or APDC.
We'll read about it on the agenda next week.
All right, McNally Park, pretty, that's the one that kind of got the, look at it, 3 people rated identically. That's pretty impressive. So it looks like it's an 18 and George has it at a 13. So that's pretty impressive. Not much to discuss there, I think. The public safety building downspout repairs. So we have. Yeah, I'm the lowest one on that one, and that's because there were other things, not that I'm against doing it. And to be honest, now that we're talking about the Ritter painting, I probably could move those a little bit. I'll probably look at that one. But it is still 2/3 of the way there. It's not like it's bottom. Well, on the lake treatment. So I'm the outlier there too, and that's only because, again, I think there's other things not like I don't think it's necessary or wanted. I just think there are other things that are higher than it.
There's a photo in the slideshow on the town's website that shows the town beach. And if you get a chance to look at that picture, there's a very interesting view of the beach and the water. And you can see a small area of sand in the water, and then it's all dark from there out. And that's where all that growth is. The
Right.
minute you get past that sand, you're in goo and tangled weeds and all kinds of stuff. Yep.
I mean, I rated it where I was because. It's kind of a. It's kind of like a special treat for.
I didn't realize people can't see some of these scores over there. Let's see.
Yeah, to me, it was kind of a. It's kind of like a special treat for the regular people in town who can go out and just. Have a good time.
The regular people.
Well, I mean, somebody not connected with with town government.
Somebody doesn't have a swimming pool.
Yeah, it's,
And it's been a discussed issue every year for many, many, many years. In fact, there
Hold
were,
it. GUST or CUSSED? Discussed or discussed? I didn't know.
discussions have
Discussion,
been
okay.
had.
I didn't know.
Sorry.
No, because some people think
Yeah,
it reads
no,
at
I
being just
get that,
discussed.
I get that. And over the years, there have been people that like to snorkel and spend a lot of time there. And they actually physically pulled weeds and they were taken away and composted and so on
Yep.
and so forth. So, it's not that it isn't new, it's just gotten to the point where there's nobody capable of even trying to get it, any chance of getting it under control.
I've never been there, Do residents have to pay, like, buy a permit to go?
Yeah, it's like a tag.
There's an individual or a
Yeah,
family.
like-
Yeah.
So that kind of paying for something and not really getting the best they could out of it.
Again, I'm not, the only thing about when you start thinking about is if some of it involves chemical treatment, you're kind of relegated to that, it'll be ongoing.
Hydro raking is the same, but it's, you're stuck. Once you're in it, you're in it.
Well, hydro, I think chemical treating is even. You're even more stuck to it once you start.
But
But again, I'm not against it, and I don't think we're wildly apart. I mean, you guys are right next to each other, and I'm the one who's the outlier, so it'll be interesting when that.
my internal logic, again, I used the word contortion earlier, and I think it's a realistic word here, because you kind of contort your brain in terms of how you put one thing above another. It's a little bit painful, for me anyway. In my mind, it's like, this is a quality of life thing, you know what I mean, like, people benefit from this every year, there's always kids on the beach. Ideally, I'd like to see more kids on the beach. This can potentially contribute to that.
Yeah, it's an
Don't
experience.
disagree.
Yeah.
We talked about the senior center parking lot, and then, so Ritter Building floor covering replacement, and that pretty much is. We're pretty much in line across the board there.
Yeah, I struggled with that one because I kind of put it in the same category as the interior painting. I rated it substantially higher than the interior painting. And at this point, I couldn't tell you why.
Probably a tripping hazard potentially.
Maybe, I don't.
I'm trying to help you out here.
I appreciate it. I have no idea, actually, now that I look.
All right, let's go to the public, said the fire department, so. This is very interesting, 7, 8, 9, and 10, so I think we all in agreement with where the radios are. And the rescue replacement. The 1 and 2 4s and the 10, so again. If everybody's logic is what I said about mine, and I don't know that it is, but I'll just put it out there, I mean. 1 to 10, you could rearrange, they all need to be done.
I think honestly, my conscious reason for moving it down the list a little bit of ways is in the realm of Peter's comments earlier, that there are funding sources that could be available quicker. And in my mind, I hope that's the direction that goes. But I didn't want it so far down the list that.
So you made
might
it
not-
priority, so you get more attention, that's like the opposite.
No,
That's like-
I wanted it down the list where it wouldn't be so low that it would get cut off from my perspective of where the dollar line is gonna be. But I didn't want to bump something else out, knowing that this one has potentially 2 or 3 other funding sources. In my mind, additional funding sources for an item moves it down in my
Okay,
list.
I understand, you made that, yeah. I mean, I will say this, as one member of the select board, I don't see the list coming out of this committee influencing what I think that's ARPA fund. I mean, I think that what's gonna get ARPA funds is probably other criteria,
Mhm.
but. You know, it's not gonna be like, oh, they rated this one higher, we should do the higher ones, or we should do the low. I don't even know how it would play into the logic, so.
My logic on this, aside from everything I've said about the funding, which I stand by. I think that the fire chief has demonstrated that. The maintenance issues associated with this vehicle in particular have clearly. Degraded over the course of the last couple of years. And the timeline that we're looking at, a likely replacement, which is probably a year. Given everything else we've ordered that we can't get for a year. And the downtime associated with this particular vehicle, when it goes down,
The risk factor again,
back to the risk. It isn't like this vehicle might get called to go save a life. It does get called to go save lives
lots.
regularly.
Yeah.
So in my mind, like, I could not talk myself out of rating it number 1.
No, I think it's fine. Okay, let's scroll down to DPW. So the crew cab pickup, the 1/2-ton 4-wheel drive. We have 3 of us in a grouping, and George has this much higher. So I don't know if there's, I mean, Actually, if we look at these three, those and the next two. Except for George being much higher on the first one, the next two were all very close on. So definitely the 6-wheel dump trucks are a necessity. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to any of those three or not.
So the crew cab pickup. I mean, truth be told, DPW has pretty good fleet of pickup trucks. Like, they got a bunch of pickup trucks, but those pickup trucks are largely gonna be used, I would assume, more this winter than other winters because of what we're dealing with the other trucks, the bigger trucks, particularly for side street plowing. And my view is that the lifespan of all those trucks is gonna take its toll as a result of what we're dealing with right now. And we don't have a half ton for the DPW director to drive right now. So we're putting unnecessary miles on 3/4 ton trucks right now.
Right.
That we, should be putting on a half ton
And
truck.
the gas utilization.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So if there's an economic story that's out there.
All right, so that takes care of those three. I don't think it's any need to talk about the dump truck, the 6-wheel dump truck, because it's rather, if we're all in agreement on those. So the cemetery turf restoration. Again, pretty much the same, not much of a spread. Mr. Passios has it a lot higher than anybody else. The other three of us are within striking distance. We're in the same ballpark.
I can speak to these two.
Yep.
And the wetland one as well. I agree with the committee that there's not sufficient information at this time to rate that project, the wetland road drainage. The turf and headstone projects. I think it makes more sense to do the headstone restoration project ahead of any turf restoration. So then we can work on the property. And the other unintended consequence of turf restoration could potentially be an impact to the operating budget and needing additional resources to keep up with the moving of that. So I think the department needs to look into further what that potential impact would be.
Can you expand on that? I'm not following your logic.
You don't have to mow it a lot now because there's not a lot of
Oh, if
grass.
you put better grass, it'll grow faster?
Right, if you right. If you make it more beautiful, it'll need, and you have grass more covered, more grass coverage, you have to cut it more. Which I thought was the point. I thought the whole point was a beautification project,
Yeah,
which is why I rated it
yeah.
that high, much higher than the restoration. The restoration would be nice, but again. But
So I think that I understand your logic, however. Does this assume with that $38,000 that we're splitting the headstone restoration, or is this a one-time project now
That
at
would
38?
be for all of it.
That's all at 38, because there was some.
yeah, the 38, we can either do 22 or 38.
Okay, all right, so we're going with 38, is that the,
Right,
the
I
game
asked
plan.
the DPW director to find out and for the superintendent, what the cost per follow.
Mhm. So. I mean, Dave had a separation of 6, but we were all pretty tight. Oh, Tom had kind of a separation there too.
For which one?
For the turf versus the headstones, you have 13.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
22.
Well, mine was way different.
So. There are two different issues in my mind. One is historical preservation and the other is quality of life. So in my mind, the headstones is historical preservation. And the turf is quality of life, because families in Lunenburg go to visit grave sites, generally speaking, that are not 200 years old, right? They're modern relatives, people we've known, grandparents, for the most part. And North Cemetery in particular is pretty heavily utilized. Like, I go there probably every couple of weeks when it's open. And I always encounter people in there during the day. And people walk in there and I feel like it needs to look nice, and the turf there is not good. And there's a lot of weeds and undergrowth and just horrible things growing amongst the turf. That I feel like this would do a lot to beautify areas of the town that
That was
people
my
use.
idea. That was my idea.
You know, it's just a quality of life thing.
But you're saying that the department itself wants the headstone restoration to come first?
That would be, that's my
Oh,
comment,
your comment.
that, if you're gonna do site work to that property, it makes sense to do that first. That
Because you're gonna bring in
But is this,
tractors
but,
or-
well, the
Yeah.
question is what,
Physical work to each of those headstones. on Grounds.
but that means the turf restoration wouldn't happen for 2 years, 3 years.
If it was moved next year, then it would be the following. Right.
Okay. I'm willing to give deference to the request of the department itself. I was totally, I was of the same mind that Mr. Beardmore was, that they're supposed to beautify what's there first. For the same reasoning that he gave, and that people will go and visit there. And when there was, when that Memorial Day issue happened several years ago, there was like an outcry of like, come on, we need to respect the people who were buried there and the families of the people who were buried there. I thought this was an addressing of that.
As a reminder, it has been difficult to upkeep, you know,
Yeah,
and that's why we've added seasonal employees
Yep.
to that department. But that's not mowing, they're doing mostly weed whacking and headstones and things like that, so. With one person right now to maintain the mowing,
So when is that study gonna happen? About how much it's gonna affect the operating budget?
I would say would have to happen this year. So we can look at budgetary impacts.
Okay,
Was there a time horizon on? When like the monument restorations would start and when it would end? I thought there was a kind of a short time horizon on that.
I think that what they provided was 20 days or. That was the initial. Before it was
20
expanded to include all of. the
20
headstones,
working days or 20 calendar days?
20 working days by
So,
company.
so a month.
company.
A month, okay.
Days.
so the worst we would be looking at is a 2-month project,
Mhm.
if we do the whole thing, right?
weather permitting,
Yeah, so
depending on when you schedule it for, if you
Right.
don't
it's
schedule it
like
in the
summer 2
spring.
years ago, will never get done.
Right, this year, you could have done it the whole entire summer.
Okay.
All right, so that, we need, so that if we can get, if there's any more further clarification from the departments, or if this is the final word then on these 2 items, because again, we're flipping what my idea was, what they meant, or what they wanted. I'm willing to flip those then. I'll just flip my numbers.
So the other thought here is that those headstones that need restoration are predominantly in one section of North Cemetery, which probably accounts for a quarter to a third of the real estate in that cemetery. I'm spitballing here, but I mean, the old section of that
Okay.
cemetery is the western part of the cemetery, so. You know, if we were managing the project, you could. I don't know, I mean,
Well, again, I mean, if we do the turf restoration, the turf restoration, I think town manager is saying, and I don't want to speak for her because she's right here, but. The point is that if we do it and we don't have the operating budget to maintain it, it's just gonna
yeah,
potentially cause more problems. Then people are gonna be like, why do we spend all this money if we're not maintaining it?
that's a
So
good point.
it probably is a hand in glove kind of thing. Okay,
And the other thing that I struggle with on the turf is that. To your point, and actually the town managers, you're gonna put whatever that dollar amount is into the turf there. But if you have a view like this and you just created a nice green turf and you burn it all up in one summer. Because you don't have irrigation, you're not gonna irrigate it. Then you've thrown the money away.
Yeah, that's true, but.
You know, there's one section, actually be just beyond my parents' grave. That knoll, I don't know what kind of grass is on there. But when it gets hot and dry, it burns, right? It just gives up down to the ground and preserves its roots,
Mhm,
and it always comes back.
mhm.
But I don't know,
I think the risk, I mean, because it's natural vegetation, I mean, you run that risk every year with anything, right? So,
but natural vegetation has more resilience than most of the turf species that you would put down. in-
well, you'd have to, again, I'm not a grass
Do we,
expert.
does anybody know, like, I know we have the hand pumps in there, like if you want water for your flowers by a gravestone or something. we have
Those
those.
are hand
Is there any
wells.
town water that comes into that area or is that, no? It's just all those wells,
Yeah, Highland Street, I think is. the
which basically
closest.
pump out of that swamp.
Well, they're 16-foot hand dug
Yeah.
wells.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you gotta choose whatever grass variety you put down there to be
Yeah.
fit for the area.
Yeah.
Got a winter, really heavy freezes and droughts and everything.
Yep.
Okay, we talked about Flat Hill drainage, let's go on to the Northfield culvert, which got, again, pretty steady marks there. So I don't know if there's anything here to discuss there. And we're off to the schools, the pickup and plow, that got 2 12s, a 13 and a 20. I think we heard from George last week what he felt the priority was with that. That it could be outsourced, but again. They're all fairly steady. The middle school, high school turf field feasibility.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and reread that.
All right,
Yeah, that was a mistake on my end.
if you're gonna renumber any of these, if there's just a couple numbers, you don't have to give me the whole spreadsheet. If there's just a couple, just tell me what projects you're changing. If you change a lot of them, then just resubmit the spreadsheet again so that I can just grab the whole column.
Okay,
But the feasibility study, I think, mine is like a little bit below the middle of the pack. I think it's an important thing to do. It really is going to be an interesting thing to hear how to find out how Matthew
Hmm.
rates these, because some of these were kind of split. Okay, fire alarm upgrade. Again, we have an 8, 9, 10, and a 14. We're all in the same kind of range there. The safety film, we have. Bless you, if that was a sneeze, bless you. I saw the motion, not necessarily the noise. So this one is very, obviously, it's 2 schools here, pardon the pun.
Three.
But they're all 3 schools, yeah. But so with myself and Mr. Pasio's rating it as a 23, and then we have a 5 and a 14. And yeah, I kind of telegraphed how I would put on it. It's not like I don't think it's effective for what it does. I just think that in what Mr. Brenner said in the last meeting, he was at a couple of meetings ago about likelihood and likely scenarios. I think that the money could be apportioned to other places that I think would have a stronger impact. Not that I don't understand other people's arguments. I understand that if it was to come into play, yes, it is a potentially catastrophic event.
yeah, so from my thinking, when I was ranking that one. Like I put school safety, the bottom 3 were my top 3.
Those are mine too.
And so my thinking when I moved the film into the middle of the pack more or less was. more or less to diversify the spending that's going on across the whole program. It's important, but the ambulance is important. You know, it's kind of like a zero-sum game kind of thing going on here, you know, it's, you're gonna have some winners and
So I would offer that mine were put right together. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And my prioritization is that after the rescue and the two trucks for the DPW and the Ansel inspection, that school safety is right there, is the next priority. And again, it's the math in my head is likelihood times impact. So the impacts of the 4 that I rated above these, I think are equal, but the likelihood is higher. Relative to the entire school security package, I reflected the recommendation that the school committee made. As the school committee's rep, this was the recommendation that they voted to submit and prioritize. But I view these as a package. As recommended by the police chief. And I won't belabor the logic that I gave you last week, but the police chief says these are a package, they go together, it's part of a combined security approach, and therefore I kind of view them in a group. And again, it reflects the prioritization that the school committee voted to recommend.
Understood. Yeah, my feeling, just only because I have probably the biggest disparity, but well, I don't know, Mr. President says decently big disparity as well between them, is that I understand that his approach was to take them as a package, but they are eventually mutually exclusive, like the safety film does not impact the other 3 items at all. The other 3 items of the door upgrades and the security upgrades, the primary school upgrades are, you know, they're separate entities. There's nothing that's reliant on the window safety film, which adds a layer of you know, safety in time that was explained to us. I just, in my mind, just didn't rate higher.
I understand the logic. It's,
I'm just saying.
in my mind, it's kind of like, not sure the right words, but I would say like the consistency of the hardening that we're doing here, right? So if, you know, you're looking at spending a lot of money, like let's take the front of Turkey Hill is the example that just kind of resonates in my head, right? We're going to spend big money on fortifying doors and cameras and creating vestibules to that entry area. And literally attached to those vestibules and fortified doors is single plate glass. So, which is from floor to ceiling. So if you can breach it, you can literally walk through it. So that's just kind of my logic.
The bottom 3, everybody agrees on, so. You know, George and I have it as 1, 2, 3. Mr. Passio says 3, 4, 5, and as already stated, Mr. Gribmore has it 6, 7, 8 as part of the whole package, so that's going to be near the top of the list. No, that's good. So now we've heard each other, and if anybody who's going to do any reevaluation of theirs, and then Mr. Brenner is going to be submitting his, hopefully for next Wednesday's meeting, where we can hopefully finalize this. If there's anything, Madam Town Manager, you want to bring up with the Eagle House parking lot, anything additional, because that seems the only one that there was kind of a dispute about, or any kind of sufficient disagreement, let's put that.
I emailed the firm, so.
Okay.
Going back to the vertex report and the backflow preventer.
Yep.
It says install do not vote to enter in our.
Right, that was my
They
understanding.
replace.
Right. That was my understanding, is that it doesn't have.
It doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay, I may take another look at that and the floor covering, so I'm gonna,
Yep.
I'm likely to,
I'm gonna change a
Make
few
some
of these. I
tweaks
can
here.
tell you that the painting, because I thought the Ritter painting was getting to the outside, and that would go a little bit lower. And there was another piece of here, I think it was, the downspout repairs, the public safety building will probably go a little bit higher. So I'll shift those around a little bit, after discussion here.
The comment from the town manager a few minutes ago regards to Flat Hill Road drainage, could she repeat that?
That she agrees that there's not enough information,
Okay,
so that one will probably be unrated,
so
but I think
we'll finalize that at the next meeting.
right at the next meeting, yeah. Next meeting should be our final and to Amanda, if you are listening still, if we can get as many of the minutes locked up, you don't have to respond now, but just if you're listening to this or when you listen to this, do the minutes. We'll probably have a meeting, even if next Wednesday is our last meeting, we'll have a meeting at the beginning of the year to finalize all the remaining minutes. And then, so sometime in January, I'm assuming it will be after the town manager puts out a preliminary budget, whenever that is. When is that happening?
Well, I need, the committee to, the first week of January, I think it was the third or. I need the prioritization schedule, because the capital plan presentation and then forecast.
Well, we're hoping that next
We'll
week
get
is gonna be our
is
last one.
shorter.
so the discussion that we had last week was we would meet in January just to do minutes.
Yeah.
Or something like that,
Yeah.
and then we would likely meet prior to the warrant.
Well, after the changes were made, so if there were any changes in the capital plan by the town manager that were. Significant, not that there was more funding, so they went down the list, but if there was something that moved up that required, and I'll. You know, we may call the meeting just to see if we agree or disagree with that. You know, in the unlikely event of that. happens. Oh, we were gonna meet for the report.
Right.
That's what it is, the capital planning report, which we would like to actually write a capital planning report by the capital planning committee. We're very
The
nuanced that
first
way.
time ever.
Well, I mean,
In your tenure anyway.
right, well,
You mean for
I'm
the-
showing capital
For
planning
the warrant,
for the town,
Annual.
for the annual report.
I don't think that our report would be substantial or significant enough for an annual report, but for the warrant purposes, I think that. The warrant, the way the report appears in the warrant, it appears as if it comes from the capital planning committee,
Right, it's called capital planning
but
report.
in fact it is.
Oh, we'll say.
So I think that there's a nuance that we can address there. I do think that there, you know, in the future, if we decide to take a bigger bite at the apple, and I think that's ultimately the purview of the committee, that, you know, the bylaw outlines, then I think that there may be fodder for a more substantial report, but until we can
Sure,
talk about a 10-year capital plan that is outlined in the bylaws, I don't really see that we have sufficient commentary for an annual report.
okay, so let's move on to approval of minutes of November 7th. We postponed these because I did not get a revision of that. But the only thing that you had was that you were not there.
Right, and Amanda responded to me that she would correct that.
Okay, so with that correction, I would, with the correction of Dave's attendance, which he was not present November 7th. And that correction, I would entertain a motion regarding the minutes of November 7th, 2022.
So moved.
Second,
All right, all those in favor of the approval of those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. The action items for the next meeting, which is finalize this list of prioritization. I will, if everybody gets me their changes, if they're gonna make changes before, if you can get them to me by the way you did today, not Wednesday at this time, but Monday at this time. So I have a day to put them in order. I will submit them in our composite scoring list, so we can go through one last time. I will get Mr. Brenner's list hopefully before then. And our next meeting is next Wednesday, December 14th, right here at the same time. You will, Mr. Beardmore will let us know if we can use the school Zoom. Hopefully by the end of the week, so I can get the agenda out.
Emailed
I saw it.
during the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, any public comment from members? Any public comment from the public? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn at 7:37 PM.
Got a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye,
Uh,
opposed? None. We will see everyone on Wednesday, December 14th. Have a good week.
You know, schedule, I think I got a fourth thing.
Try to get Mac the recording.